either by choice or by necessity. At Onlea, we create effective, accessible, and engaging online learning experiences for businesses, nonprofits, and educators. And basically, we believe this: if you can teach it, you can teach it online. It's really that simple. And we have figured out ways to teach really diverse and difficult material and do it well. So the first thing to know about some of the stuff we're going to do today. Number one is I'm going to use the word course as a catch-all for any online learning experience. So for some of you, that might be a program or a seminar or a workshop or whatever you call it. The principles still apply even if the name changes. The second thing is I'm not going to talk hardly at all today about software or learning platforms or delivery platforms. What we're talking about today is foundational methods that can help you make whatever you're doing right now better without having to go buy anything or subscribe to anything. So the Onlea team is made up of designers, educators, developers, writers, and producers with a shared passion for education technology. Now, on a practical level, what that means is our team includes people from the video game industry, the software industry, film and television. We have graphic designers, industrial designers, instructional designers, writers, but no lawyers yet. No offense to lawyers if there's any in the crowd. And everyone is involved in the problem solving for your learners, depending on what the subject matter is and the platform that we're using. We try to bring as many of those disciplines to bear in the creation of courses to make them as engaging and as effective as possible. So joining me today in the chat are William Fritzberg, our lead design strategist, and Beau Desonier, who is our client development manager. And I believe they're waving and perhaps even saying hi in the chat window, which I can't see. As I mentioned, they're here to answer your questions that come up throughout the talk and also at the Q&A at the end. Now, also lurking in the background, and they didn't know I was going to point them out, so apologies as I embarrass them here. And they're both going to be here to hopefully answer some questions for you at the end if they're able to stick around. We have Jennifer Delisle, who is a learning designer here at Onlea, and our CEO, Adriana Lopez Ferrero. I thank them all for joining us today. Okay, so let's talk about teaching online. When we're teaching online, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous, we've got a thought process and a mindfulness or an intent that goes into it. And we have sort of a result that we want to achieve that we don't always hit. And then right now, with the added layer of COVID and everything that's entailed over the past several months, I'm sure that many of you here today are feeling like, I'm tired and I don't know how to do this well. And we know that feeling. So this webinar is designed to give you some techniques to maybe just make it a little bit easier for you and to hopefully make you feel like, yes, I can engage my learners and ensure that they're getting a quality experience. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about the diverse skills and experience of our team. And what we're going to show you here today are some of the tools and tricks that we've brought with us from the video game industry, from film and television storytelling, from writing narrative, and from education that can help you build engagement with your learners online. A concept that you're going to see and hear me coming back to throughout this presentation is positive emotions. And that's a term that directly correlates with engagement. Now, with positive emotions, there are some emotions that are obviously positive, right? Happy, excited, fun. But the positive emotions we're referring to today don't just need to be bubbly, happy ones to be effective. Things like facing and overcoming a challenge can be a positive emotion. Working together cooperatively with someone else brings positive emotion. Solving a riddle or a puzzle. These all create positive emotions and build engagement. You don't ever want things to become boring or frustrating for the learner, because that is the moment they disengage. Like listening to the sound of my voice right now, some of you are probably like, okay, stop, I'm bored. And you know what? I get it. So the thought process for today is to just to bring you all back with me is how to create and keep the learner engaged for the whole course. So what we're talking about here is a thing called flow or flow state. And what flow state is a fancy psychology term that's meant to describe a prolonged state of utter and complete focus. But what we're really talking about is, let me put it this way. Have you ever been playing a video game or reading a really good book or binging a Netflix series and suddenly you look up and 4 hours have gone by? That's flow. You've been in it. You've been engaged. Why is this important? Well, in short, because your learners have signed up to learn something and they deserve to get the knowledge that they came for. So we want to keep these positive emotions up and keep the learners in a flow state for as long as we need them to be there and engaged and learning the material. So, excuse me, one of the principles that we talk about as a way to keep flow state up is the idea that the more senses that you engage, the more you're learning. And the more you're engaged, the more you retain from the material around you. I always think of a teacher that I had in elementary school that had this joke that if you moved your finger along the textbook, you learn more because the knowledge would go in your finger and up through your arm and into your brain and then back out your pencil in the other hand when you wrote notes. And yes, I am old enough that I did notes in pencil. And you know what? He wasn't entirely wrong. The more you can actually make a learner interact with the material and practice the skills or enact the knowledge that you want them to, the more they learn and retain. So our team at Onlea is dedicated to that principle. Can we have the learner interact with the material through their computer, through contact or conversation with other learners, whether it be online or offline? Also, whether it be online or offline, can they practice what they're learning depending on the subject that they're working with? We really want to build a dynamic of learning and practicing for them whenever possible. So now let's put it into practice. Some of what we do and talk about comes from the gaming industry. Some of what we do and talk about comes from storytelling. And so yes, we're going to talk about storytelling and gamification. But you know what? We're not creating a game, and we're not creating a novel or making a TV show. We are creating an online course together. And as an online course, it needs to be grounded in pedagogical principles. So that's the intersection for us today: storytelling, gamification, and instructional design. Let's say we start with storytelling. All right. So we have here the hero's journey, and I'm just going to get you all to do the thumbs up for me. Has everyone here heard of a hero's journey? Yeah, nice. I get some real and some emoticon thumbs ups. That's how I do it too. That's fantastic. So if I could get some folks to throw it in the chat, some names of books or movies that are a hero's journey, and just so that I can basically steal ideas from you and get a good example. Awesome. Yeah, the first one that comes up is The Hobbit. We have a classics fan who liked The Odyssey, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, these are all great examples of a hero's journey. The Matrix is a great one. I love that one. That's fantastic. Yeah. So and the thing about these, right, is that the learner, you know, starts in one place, is transformed through obstacles and overcoming those obstacles, and emerges a new person, right? So that's the whole idea of the hero's journey. So what if we thought about our learners as the hero on this journey? Do you think that approaches our role as a teacher a little bit? Instead of dryly delivering knowledge from a lectern, we have to rethink of ourselves as mentors who are there to help guide the hero along their path to ensure they overcome the obstacles and reap their just rewards. It's actually a pretty noble and humbling task if you think about it. Now let's run through this quickly and see if it resonates. The call to adventure is someone realizing that they want to learn a thing and signing up for your class. The teacher is the threshold guardian, and it's our job to provide the context, the why that helps push them into the transformation that they're seeking. Now, why is this important? Well, because if we can help make their learning journey about transformation and experience, rather than just about facts, figures, or knowledge, it's going to have an importance and a gravitas for them that's hopefully greater than the sum of the parts. And then, of course, on a hero's journey, there's a series of challenges and rewards for them. Now, this is the doling out of the knowledge, testing what they've learned, and giving them the opportunity to have small victories while teasing bigger challenges and bigger rewards ahead. We want the learner to find success and fulfillment early so that they're compelled to keep going. At some point, though, they need a big challenge to really test themselves. Now, in educational terms, this might be a midterm or a big essay or a project, but it's going to be their make or break moment. This is important from a practical assessment sense, but it's also crucial in demonstrating the transformation to the learner. Now, again, we're not writing a novel, so there doesn't just need to be a straight linear plot line like in a book. In a course, there's the opportunity for constant challenge, reward, and transformation. You go through challenges, you go to assessments, you go through long conversations, maybe even long lectures in some cases. You develop a revelation, a piece of knowledge that you didn't have before, and that is where the transformation happens. And that's what we're trying to achieve with online education. It can happen over and over in a course that's built well, a series of little and big epiphanies for the learner. So then at flow state, in this case, the flow state equates in many ways to passive content. There's some content that is passive, and you just stayed there too long and you get bored, right? So you keep it short and you give them knowledge, but also throughout that, you got to sprinkle in those challenges, the small challenges and the big challenges, to keep their interest up and keep their sort of ego engaged with it as well. So small challenges are when you give them a piece of content, but then you have some form of active learning or some form of dynamic learning where they actually have to practice, right? And then usually there's one or more big challenges, like actual assessments that are practices that test the knowledge. And then you reach the end. And through all these stages, the role of the mentor, the role of the guide, the role of the teacher is to give them the motivation and the context and the why to keep going. You encourage them to take an action, which is either to watch this lecture or answer this quiz, and then you give them feedback on it. So your role as a guide on asynchronous courses or in synchronous courses, which many of us are making and taking right now, the interesting part is we as instructors feel like we need the feedback within the course itself. And so we understand, right? Like if you're taking a course, you want that feedback even if the instructor's not there. So part of that is to build that right in to the architecture of the course. Okay, so we're going to talk about the introduction because you only get one chance to make a first impression, right? You only get one opportunity to absolutely grab someone's attention and not ever let it go. So if this were a video game or a book, it might be a little easier to do because you have the inciting incident, right? That plunges our hero into their journey. But this is an online course. And maybe your learner is there because someone made them sign up or because they need to get a certification. This isn't very heroic. So in this case, your role as the teacher is to help guide them to that transformation, help them understand the why, set them up to succeed on their journey and make them feel like the hero. Now, this isn't about stroking egos, though. It's important to know that. It's about giving them the tools and the context from your experience to help them succeed. So when you're introducing people to the course, it needs to be detailed enough to provide guidance, but not so detailed that you're boring them with information or overloading them with information. And you also don't want your first lecture or your first chapter or your first unit to be a boring mechanical process thing. You want to jazz it up a little. Again, it needs to be detailed enough to provide guidance, but you want to keep it short. And this is really important. It needs to be related to the content and consistent with the content. You can't just go all razzle dazzle in the first unit and have no razzle dazzle left for the rest of the course. I encourage you to use your razzles and your dazzles wisely. So in your introduction, explain the why. Why is this course important to you? Give an example of other learners that have changed or transformed through similar courses or the same course, even if that's an opportunity. And this one's really important, and this is a bit of thinking stolen from video games specifically, but tell them how they win at the course. We discuss with clients all the time about units and the order of units and the architecture of the course and the course map. And sometimes the how you win the course gets put on the back burner. But but in many ways giving a specific setup around how the learner wins the course. Some places call this critical path in an education environment. This critical path is what you will learn and why that is important in the context of the overall class. This critical path, this how to win, this is absolutely critical to engage during the introduction. And I'm going to show you an example here of an introduction we did for a course to show that it doesn't have to be super complicated. So this is an introduction to a software project management course that we made for the University of Alberta. And I love this example because the introduction is an email. This is a course on software project management. So you get an email inviting you to a project meeting. And throughout the course, you're pretending that you are already a software project manager and you're practicing the concepts. So again, this invitation, this introduction, both contains the information, embodies the information, and sort of shows why the course is important to you, because this is actually a great introduction email that you would want to try and do something similar when you were a project manager. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about structure and set that up, and I'm gonna try a second poll now before we go into content again, and let me see if I can make this one work. All right, do we all see the poll? Give me thumbs up if you do. Yeah, awesome. Okay. All right. So yeah, so this one is I want to know what your biggest fear or concern is in teaching online. And so I'm going to have a little drink of water and catch my breath and let you guys think about that and then answer it. And we'll hop right back into content in just about a minute. All right, I'm gonna end this. And the poll might have frozen on me. So we may never know the results.
We can see the results on our end.
Oh, you guys can see the results. So I just can't see the results. Awesome. Well, who wants to tell me what the results were?
Engagement is 61%, accessibility is 8%, video graphic design production is 13%, assessments is 16%, and others 3%. So engagement's the top one there with over 50% of the vote.
Awesome. And thank you to whoever that was that shared that with me. I appreciate it. So if you guys are wanting to learn how to do engagement, you come to the right place. So that's fantastic. All right. So let's talk about flow state or passive content. So passive content is honestly what is actually going to constitute the bulk of most courses, whether those are online or in person. Passive content is your lectures, it's the textbook, it's the journal articles. But since we're talking about online, we're talking about video lectures or Zoom lectures. So how do we make them engaging? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is maybe not what you would expect, but we spend a lot of time doing this with our clients. So I'm going to start with this. Put yourself in the shoes of your learner when you're building the lectures and try to keep yourself interested. That's a pretty good start before you even start thinking about anything else. So let's talk about your first lecture. Your first lecture, your first sort of piece of content is your learners are there, you're ready, you've done a really awesome introduction, they're raring to go, they're eager to soak up the knowledge. And they're here, they're connected. And so this again sounds really obvious, but you'd be amazed. Don't make your first lecture boring procedural stuff. Make it interesting. Bring a little bit of you into that lecture. We did a course, a MOOC a couple of years ago on astro black holes. It was a course on everything about black holes. And it was like a hardcore science, lots of math, a serious, university level course. But the whole first module was the profs talking about their favorite sci-fi movies and how those got them into science. And it really humanized them and created a bond with the learners that let them feel okay when those profs started introducing really complicated, formulas that are that long and stuff like that. So that's what you want to use that first lecture for. Introduce them to you and how you're going to teach the course and your relationship to the material. Then you can get to the deeper, more detailed stuff, and they're going to buy in with you. So now you're doing your video lectures. I'm not often going to tell you what you don't want to do. This is going to be one time. What you don't want to do is the same thing that you do in person if you're delivering a lecture to a lecture hall, and that's talk and talk and talk. And the reason for that is in a lecture hall, if someone falls asleep or isn't paying attention, you can call on them or throw a pen at them and know that you get them back. When you're doing it online, you have to keep things short and pithy, like 5 to 10 minutes maximum per topic. So that might mean for you that what is normally a 90-minute lecture actually becomes 10 video lessons instead. And that seems like a lot of work, and I'm not going to lie, it is. But the thing that you remember is if you're recording a video lecture, you only ever have to do it once. You're not doing it 3 times a week. So it's worth the effort to do it well and break it up. Now, of course, we've already talked about this flow state of challenge and passive. So you got to break up all that passive consumption with some sort of activity or interaction. Now, this can be as simple as a quick knowledge check. You can even ask a question at the end of the video and then have them answer a multiple choice on their computer at the end of the video. Or you can have the learner go away and practice something from the lecture, or you can give them a research task, like go away and Google everything about the first photograph of a black hole. All these things get them involved. It wakes up their brain and it involves more senses than just their ears and hopefully their eyes if they're not nodding off. So speaking of which, eyes, this is where visual storytelling and graphic design come to the fore. And this is a really touchy thing for a lot of people because they think they need expensive tools or a lot of talent or a lot of money to make it happen. And that's just not true. You really just want to use visuals to augment what you're saying. So you can use graphics, photos, videos, whatever. It doesn't need to look like $100 million movie to be effective. Although if you have that budget, it won't hurt. What you need to do is make sure that it supports the story you're telling, the knowledge you're trying to convey, and engages the learner. So even something as simple as hand-drawn sketches that you photograph on your phone and add to the lecture can actually be engaging if there's valuable for the learner. On the flip side of that is you don't want to just have, a crappy stock image that isn't in any way related to the lesson. That can disengage someone in no time. So more than it being slick, you want to make sure it's created with thoughtfulness and intent, and you're going to get a lot more mileage out of it. In a Zoom lecture like this, you can keep people engaged via the chat, which you guys all seem pretty quiet on the chat here, just for the record, because I can see it now. So that either means you're listening or you've completely checked out. So, but you can do polls, you can do exercises in breakout rooms if you want to break something out like that. There's a bunch of tools that all sorts of meeting softwares employ that you can use to keep that engagement up between learners or between the learners and you. So again, it's about approaching it with that thoughtfulness and intent. And you want to have the visuals to augment your lessons whenever possible. You guys have noticed, obviously, it's a pretty simple PowerPoint, but you don't want to be staring at my face for an hour. And I'm sure you all have lovely faces, but I don't necessarily want to be staring at your faces for an hour. I'm getting people declaring themselves present. That's fantastic. So I touched on this earlier about putting yourself in the shoes of your learner. And a thing that we talk about a lot at Onlea that catches a lot of our clients off guard is empathy. And it applies to this really as a foundational principle. So when we begin any project with a client who comes to us to build a course, we actually start with a bunch of learner workshops so that we can understand who the learner is. And the reason that we do this is because the courses are not for us. They're not for our clients. They're not even for the institutions that our clients work at. They're for their learners. And inevitably in the production process, I end up having a conversation usually with our clients where I have to remind them that although they're paying for the course, it's not for them. And we have to build it for their learners. So, this is where we get into the idea of different learners, and I'm not going to talk about different styles of learning because that's not really a thing anymore. But there's some psychology around the way people interact with things, and we'll touch on that in a few minutes. But we do this because the learners are the people who have to interact with that. And so we have to think about who those people are and how they interact with content, right? So there might be someone who's really used to reading. So we got to make sure there's transcripts for videos instead of just videos. You want to think about accessibility. So you want to have closed captions for people who might have hearing impairment or just might be in a place where they can't listen to stuff at full volume. You might have the sort of person who says, you know what, just give me the top 3 points and I can get the heck out of here. I don't want the whole spiel. So you can have stuff that touches on that. But the more you know about the learners and the more you put them in their shoes, it gives you cues on how to design and build the course for those learners. And if you build for a specific learner, you'll actually engage all learners more than if you try and build a course for everyone. So let's talk about small challenges. There are many types of video games, and small challenges in video games are generally a puzzle or combat or something, that gets you doing something active and capturing Pokemons or fighting someone at the Pokemon gym. But whoops, went too far. But when it comes to courses, small challenges take the form usually of quizzes and knowledge checks or activities. And I think this is an important time to get real about traditional education and the way that tests or quizzes or assessments are treated in the traditional education system. They're scary, right? They're sources of stress, and they don't bring about positive emotion. They bring about non-positive emotion. So part of our thought process around making online education better or helping evolve some of those traditional structures is thinking about is there a way to, if we can make quizzes fun, that's remarkable. But even if we don't make them fun, let's make them challenging and rewarding, but not necessarily a source of stress or anxiety for the learner, because that'll pull them out of the flow state and disengage them. So this sounds a little disingenuous, but make your first quiz easy. It doesn't need to be hard. It's important to remember that your goal is to teach the learner, not to traumatize them. Every knowledge check you do with them is an opportunity to make your learners feel like the hero. Positive reinforcement does not diminish the quality of the education. Now I'm going to pause here because this is an area we often get pushback from educators who don't want to say good job unless you've really earned it, and that earning it has to have come through some sort of trauma. And this is where I would remind them that they're the mentor, they're not the antagonist in the hero's journey. The challenges are there to present those obstacles for the learner. Set them up, make them hard where they need to be, but also you set your learners up to succeed and then support them along the way. It's a positive way to teach. It's really engaging for people who are online to learn. And then at each milestone, each challenge they overcome, remind them what they've achieved and how they've transformed, what that knowledge is and what they've gotten from it. It makes a huge difference in keeping your learners engaged all the way through the course. And here's the thing, content can still be hard. We're not talking about making courses a cakewalk. Astrophysics is hard. Computing science is difficult. It's dense. Engineering is hard. You don't actually need to make them harder, right? They're hard enough already. So you can do stuff where you set them up to succeed, or you can do things where you can actually test against future content, where you have some stuff that you know the learner is going to know, but you also have some stuff that they probably don't know. And if you set that up in the right way, it gives them a glimpse of what they need to learn and what's coming next. And if it's done right, they actually get hungry to move forward and learn that thing that they didn't get right on this test. So little challenges reward learning, and big challenges mark the point of transformation for your learner. It's all about transformation. And it's all about balance. So this image here, it comes from an ebook on the motivation of e-learning, and it talks about flow state. I mean, it's pretty basic, right? It's pretty self-explanatory, but I like it because it really visually demonstrates this idea of flow that we're talking about. Difficulty, if you have too much difficulty, you induce anxiety, and too much anxiety, and they become disengaged. If you have too little difficulty and too much time, they get bored and they become disengaged. So you want to try and keep them right down Main Street in the flow, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of challenge. Don't keep them there too long, letting them get bored. You want them to stay in that flow. And you want your difficulty and your time to be aligned. So there you go. And so flow state is critical in keeping the big and little challenges flowing. And I'm often, we've done a couple courses where the subject matter expert came in and they had this like super hard like quiz test at the very beginning, and it was sort of the all human knowledge quiz, and their logic was, well, this will tell the learner where they are and what they need to know. And sure, but if they don't know very much, they're going to feel really stupid, and they're going to be pretty disengaged right from the get-go. They're going to be like, why even bother? It's going to be a very particular type of learner that's going to sort of take that as a challenge. Most people are going to be pretty discouraged of that. So you want to just really keep in mind of where you think your learner is at, because you actually do know your learners, and you want to set them up to succeed, because anxiety and boredom aren't productive. Transformation and knowledge are productive. And that's what'll take you from beginning to end. So let's talk about the big challenge, because you don't want an empty classroom at the end of the term. That's a waste of everyone's time. You want a full classroom. You want all the happy faces on the Zoom meeting, and you want them to be engaged, and you want them to be engaged on the content, and they're ready to learn, and they're ready to transform through the content that you're giving them. So your role as the guide is to guide them all the way to the end. You don't want to drop people in the middle, right? And you don't want to go from 0 to 60 in no time flat. And you don't want to take someone who's an expert in calculus and start them at an 8th grade arithmetic level. So again, it goes back to knowing your learners, putting them in their shoes. And even the big challenge, you want it to be stressful, but you don't want it to knock them out. Marking our knowledge and showing what we've learned is a requirement of our lives, whether it's in school or in work. So as such, your responsibility as the teacher is to guide the learners, not just through lecture 1, assignment 1, lecture 2, assignment 2, but right to the end. So make sure even your big challenges, you're structuring to help them mark their knowledge. And not everyone's going to pass, and that's okay, but you want to make sure that they feel supported, and that they can still get the knowledge and maybe take a second crack at it. Because one of the great things about online learning is you can do assessments multiple times, right? So sometimes in a course where there's stuff that the learner absolutely has to know before moving on, rather, if they do a quiz and they get 4 out of 5 questions wrong on the little quiz, rather than the next button moving them forward, it'll actually take them right back to the content that they got wrong. So they can take it and they can go back and they can learn the stuff. And if they didn't get it the first time, it's going to still feel like they're learning something new without sort of making them feel stupid. It's helping them learn how to win. So that's what you want to do with your big challenge. And then the really important thing is you want to celebrate the overcoming of the big challenge with your learners. Like, it's a big deal. So you really want to let them know that that they did a good thing and that they've transformed and that they've got that knowledge. And this is where I'm going to touch on a little bit. There's this psychology around different types of learners, and this isn't the sort of modalities of learning that you sort of took out. This is actually something that we've stolen straight from the video game world. It's called Bartles Taxonomy, and I don't know. You can give me a thumbs up if you've heard of this before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is honestly something that that we could do a whole other workshop on. But essentially, in video games, you have sort of four zones of gamers, and this applies actually. I think you'll see a lot of your students in this. You have the explorers, right? These are the ones that just sort of dawdle around and they want to get everything, and they love to curate that stuff, and they love to sort of gather all the knowledge to them. You've got the competitors. Now, these are the people who are going to zoom through the course. They're going to want to ace every test. They're going to want to leave everyone else in their dust. And actually, most traditional education is built for the competitors. But then you also have the collaborators. This is where I fall. I love group projects. I'm the one person in the world who loves group projects. So I love, forums. I love working with people on things. I love being part of a team. So there's stuff that you can do for those people. And then you have creators. These are the people who, rather than writing an essay in 8th grade, they did a diorama of Romeo and Juliet instead of writing the essay. And it could be just as insightful and just as effective a learning tool for them, but it's a different thing. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you design stuff, some stuff for each of these, it actually doesn't disengage or alienate the other learners. They just aren't as sort of rewarded by that, but they can still be rewarded by the knowledge. So there's a really effective way to sort of build your assessments and your flow state, keeping all these learners in mind, and helping them be more engaged through the entire course. So how do you celebrate? Well, you get to the end, you want to provide the opportunity, again, for that to be taken as many times as they need to actually learn the stuff and get it, right? You want to engage them on future learning of this. This is your opportunity to say, hey, that was really awesome what you did. If you want to keep going, this is the thing that you can do. And then that helps build a long-term relationship between you or your organization and the learner. You want to explain why, how they won. And why you want them to win. And you can do stuff like badges or certificates that they can share on their LinkedIn or their social media or on their wall. And these are things that help reward learners and make them feel good about the transformation they've done, not just that they've survived, that they've actually thrived. And so that's a key thing. And we talk about badges all the time, like you do the lynda.com or the LinkedIn Learning courses, and you get a badge at the end of it. And we all sort of think it's silly, but we all have it on our LinkedIn, right? So if people care about it, people want to share when they've achieved something with the world, with their peers and with their friends. Okay, so with that, we've sort of come to the end of the formal part of this, and I've talked a lot, and some of you have been taking notes, some of you have probably had a nice nap, but I'm sure the question you're asking is, does this work? And the short answer is yes. We have created a lot of really great courses with the subject matter experts in the institutions that we've worked with, employing these tactics. Our online courses have up to 3 times the engagement of similar courses made by other companies. And you can create these type of courses that keep your students engaged, give your students learning, and give them that learning from beginning to end. It takes them on that learning transformation journey. You just got to approach it with thoughtfulness, intent, and really think about who you're learning. So Marilee Stevens asked, for courses or classes, isn't passing the course reward enough? Absolutely it is, but we all like trinkets to sort of show that we've done the thing, right? You can't just pin, I passed to the course to your shirt. So you gotta give them something to celebrate that. All right, so these are a couple of the courses that we've created over the years. Mountains 101 is another Class Central's top 50 MOOCs of all time. Some of you might be familiar with Indigenous Canada. It's been the most popular MOOC in Canada since it was released in 2017, and it recently had a new little burst of popularity thanks to our new friend, Dan Levy, who took the course and really liked it. if you'd like to see some of the other courses that we've helped organizations and schools build, you can visit our website at onlea.org, and you can even click through and register in some of those courses if you want to from there. This is the end of the formal presentation. I'm going to do one more poll to mark the end. This is the almost done poll. I'm going to launch it now. So for this one, I really want to know if we did another webinar and we haven't bored you to death on this one, what would you want that webinar to focus on? Would it be synchronous or Zoom classes, how to make good videos, academic integrity, UX design, or something else? And if it's something else, write that in the chat for us. And I'll let this go for about a minute. And so while we're all doing this, the Q&A is going to come up next. So I'm going to unmute everyone for the QA, and hopefully it doesn't turn into a free-for-all. I'll get people to use the thumbs up emoji, or you can put things in chat if you don't want to talk. That's the other reality. I'm going to open up the floor to the other Onlea staff that are with us today to answer these questions, because the reality is every single one of them is smarter than I am. All right, so let's end the poll. And I'm going to unmute you all, hopefully. Actually, I think Bo, can you unmute everyone for me?
Yes, just give me one.
Actually, you can. I think we've set it so you can all unmute yourselves. So
yeah, I don't think you can forcibly unmute them anymore.
Yeah, so there you go. So who wants to share the poll results with me, since I'm the only one who can't see them?
I can share them again.
Awesome.
Running a synchronous or Zoom classroom was the top one at 44%, followed closely by how to make better video lectures at 41%. And then trailing out the end, we have academic integrity at 6%, UX design at 3%, and other is sitting at 6% there.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. It's Ross, right?
Yeah, it's Ross.
Thank you very much. Awesome. All right. So let's throw this open to questions. Who has a question?
Jeff, quick one from the chat. Are we going to share a handout of this afterwards?
That's an excellent question. I suppose we probably could. We could share. We have a slide and we have the slides in the slide notes that we can share out. I just have to clear it with the boss before I say yes to that. Adriana can just nod or shake her head at me and yeah, that's okay. We're good to go. So, so yeah, I think through the Eventbrite registration, Bo can probably send that out to folks. So we'll give you a version of that. And just for anyone who wants it, if you can email me directly, you can reach us on Twitter, and you can reach us on Instagram as well.
I have a question. This is David Pinson. I work for Corteo AgriScience, and as part of, not as part of my role, but as part of something I enjoy doing, I do agriculture outreach to kids, mainly 4th grade kids. And this year was particularly challenging because I had to do virtual settings for them. Do you have specific advice for kids? You mainly focus a lot on lectures today, so to engage with small kids.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I was recently just chatting with an educator who teaches woodworking to grade 5, 6, and 7 kids. And you can imagine that was a challenge when they had to go virtual. And so the answer is some of these things are pretty labor intensive on the part of the educator, right? So it's thinking about, so what they actually did was they sort of built erector sets for the kids and tried that, and it wasn't actually very successful. And then what they did, there's a thing that's really popular with like preschoolers called loose parts play. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but loose parts play is essentially you gather up crap that's lying around and you engage that. And so what they did is, because they had the kids in Zoom or I think it was a Google Classroom Hangout, they would sort of they built it like a scavenger hunt. And this may not translate to science specifically, but it's this idea of practical engagement, right? Physical engagement. So they built out their lesson as a scavenger hunt, and they sort of created erector sets of stuff that most people would have lying around their house. And with that, they were able to have the kids actually really learn some of the foundational concepts, and these are like math concepts and sort of engineering concepts that you learn in a sort of grade 5, 6, 7 woodworking class, like, you know, how to cut on an angle and how to, and you know, it doesn't need to be a piece of wood with a saw. It can be a toilet paper roll with a steak knife or with safety scissors even. So so it really is. I'm going to keep coming back to this, but foundationally, whether it's adults, kids, lectures, assessments, activities, it's about thinking about the circumstance that your learner is in, what will be effective and engaging for them, and then really putting your imagination to use to try and solve that problem for them. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Jeff.
I have a question. This is early. So I teach at the university. I teach anatomy and physiology to biomedical engineering students. So my question is, I use a lot of, I grew up on a farm, so I was exposed to a lot of different accidents, and I incorporate those into my lectures. And I've had some students tell me they love those stories. I've had other students tell me they're horrified and hate those stories. And the question, you were talking about knowing your students, but what if your students are like at the diametrically opposite? Like how is there a way to, or does it just go with the flow type of thing?
So this is a great example of sort of figuring out who your primary learner is, right? So if you're teaching medical anatomy and physiology, these are science and pre-med kind of students?
No, these are engineers who are thinking.
Oh, engineers.
Doing
okay. Oh, interesting.
biomedical engineering, yeah.
Okay, and they have to take physiology, eh?
Oh, yeah, if they want to be biomedical engineers.
Oh, biomedical, right? Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that when they go talk to doctors, they understand what the doctors are talking about. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. This makes sense. Okay. So I mean, I would honestly sort of make a gut check assessment that you know, if my primary learner is the person who's into those stories, like I personally would be horrified at that,
Okay.
but also like a little bit titillated, you know.
Okay.
So yeah, I think this is where sort of the idea of consent for your learners. So like, you know, by the way, this story is going to get gross. Earmuffs.
Oh, I always tell them.
Yeah.
I always tell them.
So and that's sort of all.
I'm just curious, like if what I was using that as an example. What if you have a group of, like I have like 60 people in a course, and some of them obviously find this stuff interesting, and I'm not saying just this particular, but you could have a very broad grouping is what I'm kind of saying.
Absolutely. And so what my answer to that is, no matter like how broad your group is, you still want to design for specific learners, because when you design for someone specific, you design better than if you design for everyone. And I'll give you an example from the real world that has nothing to do with education for this. Okay. I'm old enough to remember a time when we all carried our suitcases around, right? And now we all have the rolly suitcases that are fantastic. And you'd think that like someone just had an epiphany and was like, these would be so much better. But the truth is, a luggage company wanted to try and do something different in corner of the market. So they did a lot of market research, and they figured out that the people who fly the most and need luggage the most aren't any of us. It's flight crews on airplanes. And so they went to them and asked them what they needed and what they wanted. And so they built those rolling suitcases for a tiny demographic of the overall population. And as it turned out, by designing something for that tiny demographic that was really important to them, they actually made something better for all of us, and we all benefited from that. And I think that actually applies to your classroom. So if you sort of figure out that 5% who are your essential learners, and you mold your stuff around them, There's going to be people who it's not going to work for, and that's life. But you're going to hit way more of that spectrum by designing for someone specific than by.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, thank you. That was.
And I'm going to let our instructional designer Jennifer weigh in because she knows.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a great question, and I would definitely echo what Jeff said around starting with that content warning, which sounds like you're already doing, but definitely for the students' comfort and for that empathy piece, that would be really important. But as far as your specific question around telling stories, I think even for the learners that don't like them because they're gross or whatever, that learning is becoming a lot stickier, right? So
Yeah.
those kinds of stories, those kinds of anecdotes are really memorable. And as long as they're really clearly and explicitly connected to the main learning, the main takeaway,
Well,
then
okay, I'm going to warn you, this is gross, but my youngest brother suffered third-degree burns when he was a toddler. So when I teach skin, I talk about burns.
right.
So
It's going to stay in their minds for sure.
Okay.
So as long as, I mean, the danger there is that if the story is so memorable, but it's not really explicitly connected to the content, then it'll create a cognitive overload, that they'll remember the story, but it'll push out the actual content. But if it's really intertwined with what they need to know, then it'll stick with them.
Okay,
So it
even
can
if
be
they don't
really
like it, it'll
valuable.
stick. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vincent, go ahead.
Yeah, Vincent Hanlon here. Could Jeff or other members of the team just say a little bit more about segment or episode length? You know, I grew up with the 50-minute or 75-minute lecture piece where you showed up. What's the conversation been like around that in terms of very short segments? We know that most people aren't going to tolerate much more than an hour. What have you discovered as you've been putting a lot of these things together?
Interestingly, so people won't watch an hour-long video.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's like cinematic quality, you know, Netflix documentary sort of. They will watch 10 5-minute videos in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's YouTube generation or what, but essentially what we focus on is one idea per video, right? So in a lecture, you might cover 10 or 15 ideas, right? And when you break that into an online lecture, if it's pre-recorded, I mean, obviously if you're doing it live, you're doing it live, but if it's pre-recorded, you want to break that down to one topic per lecture. And the second sort of rule that breaks that rule is that content is king. So if it's really important and really engaging and really interesting, you get a little leeway on that. I'll go back to the Black Holes documentary, or the Black Holes MOOC that we made. Almost all of the lecture segments in that are 5 to 10 minutes. But there's one where they talk about unreliable time as it relates to Einstein's theory of relativity. And it's basically the notion that if you're going faster, time slows down. That's the really simple version. If you want to watch it, go to the MOOC and learn it. That segment is 17 minutes long because it is complex and involved. But it's really interesting and engaging, and it's hard to grasp, right? So you really have to sort of go with the learner on that journey through it. And we haven't, in the sort of the course being up there, there's no drop off at that segment level. Now it's well into the course, right? It's not in the first unit. So there's that, they're already invested. So you want to keep it short, you want to keep it to one idea. And if you can keep that idea short, that's great. But if it is a complex idea that you really need time to flesh out, do that and do it well. And it's much like Jennifer said with the idea of if there's stories or examples, as long as they're related to that content and it's helping the learner, it's going to keep them engaged. William, you're a documentary filmmaker. Do you want to contradict that or add anything?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. One, we do a lot to try to understand who's taking the course and what, things might be kind of going on in their lives. Do they have kids? Do they have a family? Can they spare 60 minutes to spend on a course? If they can only spare 15 or 20-minute chunks between things, it would be really nice if they could complete something in that time frame. So that's also kind of part of the breaking things down, making it digestible, making it into bite-sized chunks is kind of to have that indicator of progress. Is that's kind of the moving forward in that learner journey. That makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions from anyone? Going once? Going twice? Awesome.
I have one more question. Sorry, it came in.
Go
I
ahead.
have no idea how my unmute works. Is there any suggestions that you have for presenting to younger students other than, like you mentioned, the woodshop story and everything, where it's kind of difficult in terms of length or engaging youth more? Is there any advice you can give me?
Jennifer, do you have any pedagogical thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest that my expertise is more in the area of adult learning. But I do have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I can speak a little bit from personal experience, but it's really just echoing, I think, some of the things that we've already been talking about in relationship to adult learning, and really keeping it to small chunks as much as you can, so that you're maximizing both their attention span, but also giving them a chance, giving their brains a chance to kind of absorb what they've learned. So incorporating those opportunities to practice what they've learned or experiment with what they've learned in those really short segments. I think that works for both adult learners as well as a younger audience. So I'm sorry, I don't have a whole lot more to offer than that. It's a side of my area of expertise, but I hope that's a little helpful.
And I'll hop in. I have some experience in theater and television for kids. And what I will say is, based on my experience, all of the stuff we said about adults or older students is true, but distilled. Kids have no bull factor, right? So one of the things that I really learned in producing theater and television for them is you got to be in there with them. Like, you're in it together. You're not talking to them, you're talking with them. And so when you're building your online lectures, and I'm not saying you got to be like Sesame Street, but if you look at stuff that's been really successful in engaging with kids, like, Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, or the stuff that's sort of kind of educational but kind of entertaining. You don't need to be Big Bird, but that notion that you're in this with them, and it's weird, and you can acknowledge that it's weird, and have that empathy with them and demonstrate that empathy with them. It buys you a lot of goodwill from them. And then I think the other reality is, know that you're going to lose them a little, and not all at the same time. And so you got to sort of power through the ones that are off picking daisies in the other room for a few minutes, and then let them come back to you. Which is a little bit. And Marilee, you had something to add?
No, I have another question that I just thought of earlier and I forgot about, but I'll wait till you're done with this question.
That was all I had. Was that helpful, I hope?
Yeah, and just one last question from me is, as you're saying, you have experience with younger audiences. In saying that, do you have any advice on what would be maybe more preferred, either like a webinar or those recorded videos that you're saying?
This is a tough question. I'll say that my wife is a youth librarian at EPL, and they've moved all their programs online. And they're actually having this conversation right now about sort of between Zoom and Facebook. They do Facebook Live stuff, and they do stuff in Zoom for their baby lap time. And the big sort of issue is that Facebook Live is way easier for people to register and get on, but it's like watching TV. You can't actually interact, right? Whereas in Zoom, you can have some interaction, either direct through the video or in the chat and that sort of thing. And so they both have positives and negatives. And so pre-recorded videos, if they're short and entertaining, can be really engaging and really convey the information. But there's no way for the kids to say it back, right? Like I mean, when I was a little kid, there was a show called Polka Dot Door that I loved, and I swore that she could see me, right? I used to sit when I was doing stuff, you know, it was bad. I'd sit out of the angle of the TV so that she couldn't see me, but I could still watch the show. So kids have that sort of that sense of play and imagination that we lose as adults, sadly. So you can't overestimate that ability to interact with them. So I think some combination of, if there's stuff that, you know, like learning to count or learning to spell or learning the alphabet that they can sort of just do by rote and be entertained by, you can pre-record those, and that's great. But stuff where you want them to interact, if you can do that live through sort of a webinar format, I think you get a higher level of engagement for them. And you know, the other thing that I guess I should have said at the beginning of this webinar is, especially since COVID, a lot of this stuff is really new and no one really knows. There's not a lot of research out there on this stuff. So you know, all of you who are doing this are at the bleeding edge of experimentation and trial and error. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just like, you know, you're leading them on the journey of the knowledge that you're sharing with them. But in terms of how to do it, you're on that journey yourself. So cut yourself some slack. And
I would add to that, as a design thinker, human-centered designer, I would ask your students what they think. You know,
Rachel actually just said that very thing. She was just at a webinar where they asked the younger students to give feedback and then design activities to get them active and on their feet because they spend too much time sitting around. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Sorry, this might actually be kind of related to that. So last summer I did a lot of the things that the Center for Teaching and Learning at the university was putting out, a lot of their stuff. And so I ended up doing about half my coursework asynchronously and half synchronously. Do you guys have any idea, like, is there a good proportion? Like, should I have like 3/4 asynchronous or is it kind of more related to the material?
William or Jennifer?
Sorry?
William or Jennifer, you want to take this?
I vote Jennifer.
Yeah, sorry, if my audio froze for a second. I'm getting a thing saying my internet connection is unstable. I think I caught it. I think I caught it all.
Yeah, no, just more a proportion of asynchronous to synchronous in terms of setup, or is it really kind of dependent on the material?
Yeah, I think the material is a big part of it. I think your own personal teaching style is a big part of it. I think that there's advantages and disadvantages, frankly, to each. Yeah, I think it comes back to a lot of the things that we've already talked about, that with an asynchronous course, you do have the opportunity to break it up into smaller chunks, which I think is a really, really powerful way to improve learning, because again, it comes back to that cognitive load theory, right? That you're not overwhelming them with too many ideas at once, and then students can really incorporate that material into their lives, into their schedules, which are obviously quite taxed, especially during the pandemic. So there's a lot of advantage there, but then it comes back to what we were just saying about you lose that opportunity to interact, to answer questions in the moment, and I think also to check in with where they are emotionally. I think that maybe less so at this point in the pandemic, but I think that's become a big piece of instruction lately, is being there for that empathy and you know, kind of understanding where students are emotionally. So I think a balance of the two probably is ideal because of those different advantages.
Yeah, I did about 50-50.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice balance. And certainly some content and some instructional activities are going to lend themselves better to one form or the other. So if you are able to strike that balance, then you can really let the content kind of lead you.
Okay. No, I just was wondering if there was something in the literature or somewhere that kind of, but yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was very
I
helpful.
mean, not that I've
That was
seen.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I just add that if you actually sort of look at your course and all your material, you sort of, I'll use an example of, we did a thing with some librarians at the U of A who were teaching, helping students with
Literature reviews.
literature reviews. Thank you.
Sorry.
Literature reviews are a pretty tedious and kind of complicated thing to get right.
Mhm.
And they used to do them in person. And essentially, they would do like 45 minutes of instruction and then like 3 hours of answering questions specific to that student's research, right?
Mhm.
And they were trying to replicate that in a Zoom environment, but it was chaos.
Yeah.
And so what they figured out, or what we recommended to them, was the idea of, there's things that are repeatable, or things that are there's portions of that, sort of that 45 minutes at the beginning of the class, could all be made asynchronous, right? Because that's just stuff they need to know. It's processed. It's learning the context of stuff, and students can watch it over and over again until they get it. And then you can actually schedule Zoom time and probably accomplish in like a 10-minute Zoom call one-on-one with the student. The student feels a lot more rewarded because they've had a one-on-one interaction, and it doesn't like kill all of the librarian's time that way. So if you have some sort of obvious things like that, where you can say, yeah, this is clearly just me talking about a thing, that can be asynchronous. And if it's something you really want to get feedback from them on, that's, and they're not all going to be that obvious, but a lot of it actually is pretty obvious when you think about it.
Well, I have them in mind because it was anatomy and physiology. The anatomy loaned itself to asynchronous, and the physiology was to the synchronous. But yeah, no, I've been trying to figure out the best balance. And like you said, we're learning as they're learning. I actually had my last lectures this morning. Wow. And I told the students I was so, well, I have to admit, I'm actually quite proud of how the students are handling this, as opposed to maybe me. I think they're doing much better than I'm doing. So
that's
amazing.
Awesome. That is awesome. Cool. Anyone else before we say thank you and goodbye? I don't see any hands up.
This was extremely helpful, though. Thank you for doing this.
It's our pleasure. We say, it's funny, we've been having a lot of these conversations with people in private, and we realized, hey, maybe we should just throw our doors open to the world, and maybe we can help some people, because we really do want learning to be for everyone.
Can I just ask, and is there your website, will it have a list of upcoming sessions of these? I found out about this because I think my goddaughter works for you. My goddaughter Tia told me about this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's why I'm here, because she's like, I think you could learn a lot. And I'm like, thanks, Tia.
She's very talented.
She's very talented, but she knows how to get me. So, but if there's a place that you've got upcoming ones listed, I'd like to. So
I think, and Bo can confirm this, but I think so. You all registered through the Eventbrite. So what will probably happen is we will schedule more. We'll do another one in the new year. So we'll send you an email, and there will obviously be an opt-out on the email. So if this was it for you and you don't want any more, you can just opt out of that email. But once you've registered now, we'll invite you to the next one for sure. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. One last call for questions. No. All right. I'm going to finish early. I'm very excited about that. Sorry, I have a question. Can we involve high technology as an augmented reality to keep the business processes to the student's hand in the sense of impacting the processes of experiential learning? Okay, that's a pretty intense question. You can involve things like augmented learning or virtual reality learning. We have done that. I'll give you an example. So what I'm going to say before I give the example is you can absolutely do that. And there's places where it's super effective, but it's tied to the content and it's tied to that experience. So I'll talk about two things. One, there's a group at the U of A that use VR to teach dental anatomy to students, and they actually wear the headset and they get like right into a room, and it's a real fake room where you walk around and like a 3D head comes out and you can like pull people's teeth out. It's super cool. It's super involved. And obviously that's hard to do with real people. People aren't just going to sign up to let you yank their teeth out and dig around in them. So that's really cool, but that's actually really expensive. A thing we did that was sort of a combination of virtual reality and augmented reality was two things. We did a course for the Rick Hansen Foundation. They do accessibility assessments for buildings. So they train people to go into a building and assess it for its accessibility for people with various disabilities, visually impaired, hearing impaired, in wheelchairs or limited mobility. And so that's obviously a pretty nuanced and complex system. So they've been offering this course in person, and one of the reasons they were reluctant to put it online was because it's difficult to sort of create that empathetic thing for people. Because one of the things they do in the in-person class is basically throw you in a wheelchair and say, okay, get from point A to point B, and you get to see how hard it is to actually do that. So we actually, for them, created a 360 video that tracked the journey of basically trying to get from your car to a meeting in an office with Rick Hansen. It's like a 3-minute video, but it's very immersive, and it sort of shows you, you're lower to the ground, you can't be seen by cars, you almost get hit by a car. So it's a good empathy builder, and sometimes VR can be really good for that. And then the other thing that we did for them was as an actual assessment tool, we used a real estate tool called Matterport. And if you've ever looked at real estate listings and they add the 3D tour of a house, that's called a Matterport camera. And it's basically a camera that scans an area in 3D and does this 3-dimensional map of it. And so we were able to let people tour a space. It was actually the Athabasca University campus up in Athabasca. And then in a dollhouse sort of blueprint version of that, they were able to mark all of the places where it was deficient or good for various disabilities. And that way all the students were able, regardless of whether they were in Newfoundland or Vancouver, to do an apples to apples comparison of how well they had learned that assessment material with other students, all based on assessing the same space. So those are pretty cool toys, but they got to be related to what you're trying to teach them. So if you have an idea to use something like augmented reality or virtual reality, and it aligns with your learning objectives and your subject matter, boom, go for it. It's fantastic. As long as economics and technology aren't a barrier to those students, right? So there's all sorts of things to think about.
Sorry, I have another, just because of what you just described, where would you find that video about I teach rehabilitation technologies as well at the U of A. Where would you be able to find that content?
So that content is in the course, okay, which you have to register for the course to. But
is it through Rick Hansen? Or
it's through, you can find it through the Rick Hansen Foundation, okay, or through Athabasca University's Power Ed continuing education.
Okay. No, I just would be interested in checking it out just to see what it shows. That's all.
It's pretty cool.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So with that, I think I will say thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. We really do appreciate you taking the time. We hope that we have been somewhat helpful. And like I said, we will do this again in the new year, and we hope to see you then. Thanks, everyone.